Last session is actually a published paper. We published it many years ago. It's called the Alert Training Program, where we went and trained at Boston University. We had over 2,000 first responders that went through the BSL-4 laboratory. We trained them on emergency response, a program that started in 2004 at Emory University. We're doing simulation training for BSL-4 emergencies, and we simulated an unconscious individual in a BSL-4. And as I was watching it unfold in the laboratory, something didn't seem right. Just didn't feel like we were doing what we were supposed to be doing. And the reason it felt that way is because we weren't medical professionals. We were biosafety professionals. And so we decided after that training that we would form a committee. And we were very fortunate because Grady, which is a level 1 trauma center, at Spring University, and we brought over emergency medical doctors, emergency rooms, and firefighters and EMS. And we demonstrated what we would do in BSL-3 and BSL-2 or BSL-4 laboratories. And they laughed at us. They honestly did. Said that the person would be dead before we even left containment. And that day changed everything that we recommend in emergency response. So everything you learned about needle sticks and unconscious individuals, though I'd like to say that as a biosafety professional, we developed it. It wasn't. It was developed by first responders and emergency doctors and from emergency med services. The paper goes into greater detail as to who was responsible and who helped us do that. Okay, so talk a little bit about that. This is the alert. We still offer this program around the world, train people. And the goal of the alert training program is to teach firefighters, police officers, politicians, the general public, anyone who would be interested, to teach them about containment. How scientists work with very dangerous pathogens in a very safe way, that we are not adrenaline junkies, that we don't take abnormally high risks. This work is very calculated, it's very strategic, and so it's a program that we teach first responders and actually have the laboratory scientists. Again, Lee and Henry are mine. Dr. James Augustine, I was the leader who provided the docs, the emergency med docs that got together and really developed in 2005 by firefighters, police officers, infectious disease doctors, and biosafety experts. The goal was to increase awareness about emergency response labs, called the Applied Laboratory Emergency Response Training Program, and has delivered to over 3,000 emergency responders globally. Again, it's used, we give it out to people and they use it now really as a format for teaching. Program effectiveness has been measured on firefighters, police officers, EMS, politicians, media officers. We also have press that come in, offer a pre-test, perceptions of high containment work, and post-test, and we see a massive perception reduction of risk. Just all right, but I don't have to teach you guys. Part 1 of the program is, and so what we do is you take a large group of people. Part 1 of the program is about biology. First thing we do is we teach about the business. One of the things the general public wants to know is, why are we doing work? 1941, there was a discovery of something that really scared the United States. Germans using Japanese were taking We're unaware of that. Bioweapons program and defensive. And if you haven't gone to Fort Detrick, you got to go. I'm going to Fort Detrick not next week. Now between 1942 and 1949, had a very, as did many other countries, were making biological weapons for the battlefield, and in 1949 decided that biological weapons were uncontrolled. For. And the reality is that he, along with many other countries, formed the Biological Toxin and Weapons Convention in 1972 and signed the BTWC. Now, that meant that countries decided that they would not be working with biological weapons in offensive nature, nor would they store biological weapons. They would get rid of them, and they wouldn't teach technologies for how to use them ever again. Okay? Unfortunately, there was an anthrax event in Russia, and it was near a facility. And what basically happened was they shut down the facility to replace their equivalent of a HEPA filter. Unfortunately, the job was not done overnight. They turned the facility back on, and the HEPA filters weren't replaced. A lot of Bacillus anthracis left the building. The wind patterns. You look at the outbreak. So we suspected that even though the former Soviet Union had signed the Biological and Toxic Weapons Convention, we suspected that maybe something was going on. And in 1979, that anthrax event happened. And in 1992, there was an admission after the Cold War that the secret biological weapons program had been fully active in the former Soviet Union for those 30 years. That put us substantially behind in defensive countermeasures. So after that admission, we started to ramp up our defensive work. And in 2001, the defensive work primarily was being done by the military. However, in 2001, the anthrax attacks occurred. That anthrax attack used what we call an enhanced agent. The Bacillus anthracis spores were coated with silicon, which basically meant that small quantities of it could be dispersed over large areas very easily. It led to 22 cases of anthrax, 11 inhalational, 11 cutaneous, with 3 deaths. Okay. At that point, that was it. At that point, all BSL-4 lab space in the United States could fit on 1 basketball court. Today, we can't even fit it on 3 football fields. So that's the contrast of where we are and where we've been. Because of that biodefense aspect and Mother Nature, the pandemic threats that we have seen, high containment laboratories are not only something that I believe in, but are desperately needed to offer the greatest amount of protection, not only to the scientists doing research, but also to the communities in which those laboratories reside. Okay? That's why we have the laboratories that we have. We don't build laboratories for the threats we know about today. We build laboratories for the threats to come. All right? That's the first point we make to the emergency responders. Okay? Gives us a reason for why we have high containment. The second part of the alert program discusses the differences between BSL 1, 2, 3, and 4. BSL 1 laboratories house agents that are typically not going to make a healthy human being sick. They can make people who have compromised immune systems sick. But typically, if you're healthy, a BSL 1 laboratory will not make you sick. So it's designed in a way, very minimal design is needed. BSL 2 laboratories are laboratories that house blood-borne fecal oral routes of transmission. The #1 killers in the world reside in BSL 2, minus tuberculosis. That's HIV, malaria, and influenza. Most of those are worked in BSL 2. We teach people that agents are not parked at containment levels. So for example, if I say, what level is Ebola worked at? Thank you very, very much. Most people will say 4, but it depends. It depends on what state is the virus in. Is it active? Is it inactive? Is it only a partial strain of that virus? Meaning it's not infectious because it's only a component of it. It depends. BSL-2 laboratories are designed to house agents that are bloodborne, fecal, oral routes of transmission. Meaning, when you look at engineering, number one is a moped, number two is a sports bike or a Harley Davidson. Number three is a Mercedes coupe. It is a highly designed laboratory designed to house agents that are spread through routes of aerosol. Okay, like Bacillus anthracis, Yersinia pestis, Brucella. And when you look at BSL-4, these are agents that we have no medical solutions for, or they're so new and so novel that we're trying to determine what the overall risk is going to be. Health and safety of scientists and to the community. Okay. Now, BSL-3 is at Mercedes-Benz. BSL-4 is a fully loaded Hummer. Now, as a scientist, and this is how we kind of explain it, as a scientist, let's say it's a sunny day and the market is a block away and you just want to go to the market to pick up a pack of gum. You've got 4 vehicles. You got a moped, you got a Harley Davidson, you got a fully loaded Hummer, and you've got a Mercedes-Benz coupe. Which one would you use if you were interested in saving the most gas? The moped. That's the BSL-1. Okay, now, you could use the fully loaded Hummer. You could take coli and work with it at BSL-4. What a waste of resources. You could take the fully loaded Hummer to the market. Now, if you're going to take a stroll along the beach, maybe 20 miles, it's beautiful, it's sunny, clear roads, which would you take? The moped, the Harley, Mercedes-Benz, or the fully loaded Hummer? The Harley. What a beautiful ride that would be. If you're going to go cross country, California to New York, which would you take? Mercedes. If you're going off-roading, which would you take? You see, for every journey, a car or a transportation device is, and for every agent, every aspect you're doing, there's a different design lab for that work. Okay? So we explain BSL 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we say, if you're ever asked to respond to a lab, you know what the scary part is? Fire departments will tell you. We've done this training everywhere, and they'll tell you. They will respond to a fire in a business park, and it's a lab. No one even knew that the lab existed. They will walk in and they will see cabinets, they will see incubators, they will see freezers, they will see animal cages, and they have no clue what those things are. So we teach them. Biosafety cabinet, if it was on fire, leave it alone. That's where all the work is done. That truly is the laboratory. Do not touch those things. Oh, okay, I had no clue. The incubator, if it's on fire, let it burn. Let it burn. Don't open it up. Why? That's the oven. That's where all the agents are kept in viable states. It will make you say, oh, okay. This is a plate. If you see a plate like this on the ground, this is not a good thing. Not something. If you see animals, they're not cute. They could be sick. They're not trained. Do not assume that you're going to save a wild animal or a caged animal, an animal research animal. They could be sick. And last but not least, if it's a freezer, the agents are sleeping. Do not disturb them. Do not wake them up. Firefighters and police officers need to know this if they're responding to these and they find themselves in the middle of a lab, in the middle of a fire, and not know that it was a lab. Okay, so we educate them on the most important pieces of equipment. Okay. Then we talk about this. All right, I'm going to play it one more time because it's very important. Laboratories are built to set up this types of circumstances. Don't ever have a fire training for laboratory staff unless you teach them about this. Because a laboratory is designed to be as airtight as it possibly can be. And if a fire happens, sometimes the engineering controls will automatically shut the HVAC systems down to starve the fire. So when a fire alarm goes off, HVAC shuts down. Its true purpose is to starve a fire. So you're outside of a lab, you see smoke in the lab, and that's all you see is smoke. And so you look at your magnehelic gauge and you see the air is flowing into the lab. And so you grab your fire extinguisher and you open the door and bam, oxygen hits and there's an explosion. Be very careful. Always teach. Number one killer of firefighters every year, these things. always teach people about this in fire response for labs. And we tell firefighters this all the time. Be very careful with laboratory fires because it could set up that backdraft situation. Okay? So we talk about that. Very important. All right? Then we talk about fires and biocontainment. What we talk about that is we give them a little understanding that there's several different things that high containment labs will invest in. Some will invest in water suppression systems. Some will say, no way, we'll lose a lot of equipment, so we're not going to do water suppression systems. Some will have halon gas. We don't see that very often anymore. Some will just subscribe to no water suppression system, but they will shut the lab down and literally lock it down. The dampers will close so that the oxygen is starved. There's all different strategies. What you need to do if you're going to be doing an alert program is tell the firefighters what systems you have should a fire occur in a lab. Okay. You have water systems and biolabs. Get ready. You're going to flood your labs, which basically means you're going to lose containment. So be careful with that. And be ready for that. If you have biolabs that have sprinkler systems. We then talk to them about security in labs. We explain to them that it's a secure lab. We require background checks. We assign pins. We do training. We have camera surveillance, 24-hour surveillance on it, locked freezers, inventory pathogens, inventory. We basically say, look, we're doing high containment research. Our security standards are very, very high. We're letting them know that everything that we're doing so that when they say, oh, okay, well, this work is being monitored, we have good safety, we have good security. We're looking at those things as well. That's session one. They take session one, they take a test at the end of session one. So we give them a pre-test and a perception test, and then we make sure that they mastered that and they go to number two. Okay, any questions on section one? Again, you're not training laboratory scientists on this, although the laboratory scientists like to attend it. They really do. You're training people who really have no idea what containment is. Okay, when we go to part two, it's controlling biological risk. So how do we do this work safely? Well, we talk about identification, assessment, management, communication. Talk about the fact that the hazards are the agents, the people, and the culture. The neat part about first responders is they get that. They totally get it. Firefighters know culture matters. Police officers know people matter. It's not just the most obvious risk. It's everything. So they like that we're thinking about that. They know about risk assessment. They also know that science doesn't define everything. They'll be the first to tell you that. Okay, so we go through every one of these and tell them this is what we do for every laboratory, every procedure, everything we're doing. We go through these four processes. Then we explain the four primary controls of biosafety. And we show them, because we do this training in a lab, we show them. If you guys wanted to do this training, this alert training for Lubbock first responders, the training lab would be perfect. You'd walk around, you'd show them the freezer, you'd show them the incubator, you'd show them the biosafety cabinet and how it works. You would show them and tell them everything that a scientist does to make sure that what they're doing is safe. Okay? So you would show them using the four primary controls. Then you would show them the PPE. And not only would you show them the PPE, but then get ready. This is where the best part comes for firefighters. Firefighters and police officers are very well trained in chemical response. They're very well trained even in radiological response. They suck at biological response. They suck. They suck at it. They are not good at it. They can't talk about decon. I mean, they'll flood and they'll pour it everywhere. They can't talk about the PAPRs and the right equipment. What masks do you, they absolutely. This is a beautiful opportunity to talk about what they need to stay safe. And when you're dealing with a firefighter, you say, listen, your mask your SCBA mask, perfect. It'll protect you against every biological agent. When you come out, just take the hoses, spray the person down. They're totally decon. You're ready to roll. And they're like, even with Ebola? Most certainly with Ebola. Ebola is a lipid envelope virus. It's very easy. It may be not crypto. Crypto, though, it'd fall off. You spray your person down with the hose, you'll be just fine. And so you get talking to them, and they're like, wow, I know. Wow, okay, so our SCBAs will be good with biological? Absolutely. And it's like, okay, they're thinking that they have to wear a level A HAZWOP suit. Same with the chemical for a biological agent. That's a big waste of time and a waste of resources. So you teach them these things, okay? Then you've got standard operating procedures. You show them all your SOPs. You walk them, you give them your manual, you let them flip through it because that's impressive. They'll look at it and, wow, you guys have SOPs for how to write SOPs? That's pretty cool. Then you talk about your leadership engagement, okay? And then the next phase, you go to the chain of infection. A lot of people don't realize what it takes for people to get sick. It's got to escape somewhere. Now, in a lab, we've enhanced that. I tell them, in a lab, what we've done is we've made sure that that exists. Everything we're working with in the lab is and can transmit disease. So we're no longer looking at another host that has to expel it. So we've advanced that. We've taken what they expel and we've grown it, and we're growing it. And they're like, "You guys grow it?" You're like, "Oh yeah, we want it, man. We want the best of the best. We're growing it." And people are like, you get a little concerned. I said, "Okay, now, but once we've grown it, it's got to find a way into your body." That's what personal protective does. Is it creates a barrier into your body. However, even if it finds a barrier into your body, it has to be a susceptible host. And they say, "Well, wait, okay, what do you mean?" Well, majority of the agents that we work with, some of the time, not majority of them, some of them don't even live in human host. I'm like, wait, so you're doing all this for humans? No, we're doing it all for the animals on the outside. We have to secure what we're doing with the animals and plants. It could hurt them. That's why we're doing it like this too. So they're not even knowing. They're like, wow, okay, that's interesting. But you have to be a susceptible host. And then you say to them, you ask them, do you think every time you're exposed to something you get sick? And they're like, well, yeah, no. It depends on your hydration, your function of your immune system. Just because you have an exposure doesn't mean that you're going to get sick. You still have to be susceptible. And even then, we have an incubation period. So then I go into a route and I say, let me ask you this. If you're working with Ebola and you have a needle stick with Ebola and you've been exposed to Ebola, does that mean the person needs to go into the slammer right away? And they usually go, oh, yes, absolutely. They can't go home to their family. Oh, yeah. No. It takes at least 3 days for that virus to begin to grow at enough load to cause the person to be symptomatic and even to cause illness to occur in another person. So you can at least send them home, let them spend the night with their family, eat dinner, and then pack their stuff and report to the hospital the next day. That's typically what we see from a protocol standpoint. They have no concept of the incubation. The incubation period gives you time to prophylactically treat as well. So you can offer drugs to make you a less susceptible host, and there are countermeasures that you can do even if you have an exposure. You see their brains go, like they hadn't even thought about that. So we've broken it down step by step for how an individual not only has an exposure, but how they get sick. Then what we do is we say, listen, not all agents are built the same. And this blows their mind too. So for example, I'll say, let's talk about HIV, or better yet, influenza or SARS. If I take any one of those and I throw them in a chlorinated pool, 1 part per million, within 15 seconds, every single one of those are inactivated. Every single one. Okay. But if I take cryptosporidium and I put it in a pool at 1 part per million, it takes 6.7 days to inactivate that. They are not equal. Viruses and parasites, everything has a completely different kill time. And scientists know that. And so every single laboratory is designed to make sure that whatever it's working with, it has a strategically designed inactivation protocol for that. We're very well aware of that. Again, you see, because they're responding and they're like, oh my God, I could show up and this virus is there. How do I know how long it's going to take for that to inactivate? So very, very big. And that's why, I've done a lot of emergency response. I'll respond to Ebola outbreaks 10 times any day and twice on Sunday than a cholera one. I hate cholera outbreaks. Hate them. Everyone gets sick on cholera outbreaks if you don't follow rules. Everyone does. That damn thing is so hard to inactivate. It's like Ebola is nothing. Ebola, it looks at you, but you look at Ebola the wrong way, it gets hurt feelings and dies. It's inactivated. Cholera will just laugh at you. It just shucks at you. Like, I'm not going to die with that bleach. Same goes with crypto. Crypto's the same way. Like, yeah. So we know what we're dealing with and what we're working with, and we have inactivation strategies that work very clearly with that. Okay? Then we teach them all the beaking method. So what we do, and this just blows them away, you can imagine, every group has about 30 people in it. We give them all gloves, coat all gloves, glow germ. We turn off the lights. We say, close your eyes. Because you don't look when you take off your gloves. You take them off like you normally would. Glow germ everywhere on their hands. And we tell them, listen, see that one? That's Nina Pham, the Texas nurse. Nina Pham got sick treating an Ebola patient because we believe it was contaminated PPE that caused her infection to occur. So let's take a look at where the glow germ is on your fingers. See if we can find any glow germ on cuticles. And guess what? If you were working with a sick patient and you took off your gloves in that way, guess what would happen? Oh man, they turn off those, because there are some people that are really good and some people that aren't. There's glow germ everywhere. They've touched their eyes, glow germ everywhere. Then we teach them the beaking method, turn off the lights, have them do the beaking method. They see it works. And now they're really happy and they're thrilled. And then we go on to the next section, which is part 3. Okay, so that's the second part. So again, as you're rotating with first responders, you're getting this aspect in containment. Again, I think this is the highest rated program that we have, because we have, I think it's a 96% excellent rating when first responders go through this. They love it. I think you guys said you provided training for engineers. They typically love the training for engineers. This is just, again, we call it self-defense against biological weapons. And so they, or biological agents, they like it. The last one is emergency response. So now they want to know, how are we responding in emergencies? The first thing we tell them is, when you show up, you should expect a laboratory to have an ICS system. You need to ask 4 big questions. Number 1, what are the scientific risks? Number 2, how do I control the environment where those risks are? Number 3, what are the safety risks and concerns? And number 4, do you have animals and what are those concerns? If firefighters and police officers and EMS do not show up and ask those questions, they're not prepared to respond to containment. They will blindly go in and could potentially put themselves. So you teach them, these are the questions you need to ask. And you see all the chiefs like write these down, and then it becomes part of their protocol. And they're like, okay, good. When we show up to a lab, this is what we're asking. So it's like they, but you have to teach them that. They don't know what to ask. Okay. And one of the chiefs was like, well, explain to me what the difference is between scientific risk and safety risk. I said, the scientist is going to know what agents are in there. They're going to know the chemicals. They're going to know the agents. I said, the safety risks are chemical, biological, and radiological. So now you're going to talk to the safety person about how you're going to deal with those scientific risks. Oh, okay. So for example, we did a drill at ATCC. And it was a workplace violence drill. And the simulation was that the person, after attacking the staff, would grab vials and run out of the building. And I'll tell you the responses from the police. So first was, can we use a canine unit? Absolutely, you could use a canine unit. The canine, what are you working with in there? So they asked what we're working with. They called the vet. The vet said there's prophylactic treatment, and they released the canine unit. Everything went well. It was great. The canine tackled the person. It was good. So then we put, I'm going to tell you the gender differences too, because it's very interesting. Then we put a man in there with a vial. And the first exercise is that person complies 100%. So they come out, the police officer immediately sees them, draws the gun, says, get down on the ground. The person gets down on the ground. They're holding a vial, gets down on the ground. And then the police officer tackles them. And we said to him, the PPE you're touching is from a very, and the police officer had no idea. So that was situation number 1. Situation number 2 was a different officer, a gentleman, but this time the person would not comply. So they grab the vial and they run out, and the police officer tells them to stop, and they keep running, and the police officer shoots them. That's serious, and was within legal rights. So they the lieutenant was there and the captain was there, and the person had a vial of dangerous substance, and the officer was in line for shooting. So then we change it. I want to see, if there's any gender differences, because we noticed this in Montana when we had a woman do it, did something change? Absolutely change. Woman comes out with a vial, non-compliant. She decides to run away with the vial, and the officer's running behind her. Stop! Stop! And then tries to get in front of her, and she just keeps running. Stop! Stop! The officer wouldn't touch her, wouldn't shoot. I mean, it was a very, and all officers, by the way, were unbiased, meaning they never got to witness what had happened prior. So you run those simulations and you run those scenarios, but they need to know. First responders need to know what they're coming to, and they need to know the questions that they need to ask when they arrive. Okay. Yes, that's it. That's correct. If the police officer feels like their life is at risk or the community's life will be at risk, they have justification for lethal response. It could be. It could be. It was a plastic vial, so we hadn't thought about glass vial. Let me tell you one thing that we did do, which was really kind of funny. An officer that went to shoot the person, we said, would you consider using the taser? And the officer said, we're not all issued tasers. I said, well, what are your officers issued? And they said, pepper spray. I said, well, why don't you use pepper spray then? And oh, this is so funny. This was so funny. The officer says, pepper spray doesn't work on peppers. And I looked at him and said, oh, yes, it does. And the reason why we know that is when you do training for so much, people sometimes will have bad gas. And so they'll pass gas, and people in peppers will be like, God, they smell, people, they smell. And years and years of this. So I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, pepper spray does work. No, it doesn't. He got really belligerent. I said, okay, if you don't think it does, can we spray you with pepper spray in a pepper? Yeah, yeah. We put the pepper on him, shot it right at the cartridge. Damn guy threw up in the pepper because he couldn't get it off quick enough. So we were able to teach police officers that you could use non-lethal force with pepper spray on peppers, and that you didn't need to hit the eyes. You could just spray it in the HEPA filter. So, yeah. But it was so funny. It was perfect justice because one of the guys was standing next to me, the officer, and I was like, are you okay with this? He goes, oh, yeah. He goes, I'm a Marine and I trained in bioweapons. He goes, I know that's a HEPA filter. It's not a chemical cartridge. He says, he's done. And so he says, I'm just watching for the show now. And I was like, man, that poor guy. It was so bad. He was throwing up in the pepper because he couldn't get it out quick enough. Okay. I'm sorry. Building emergencies. When we do building emergencies, we like to tell them that we do have failures. And we do. Like they need to understand that we have failures all the time. We have system failures. We have water leaks. I mean, when I was here, you guys dealing with water leaks. You have gas leaks. You have fires in autoclaves. I mean, these things happen and they don't require us to go, help 911, So they need to understand that we are always dealing with emergencies on our own and we're capable of dealing with them and addressing them, okay? Where we start to need their help is when a fire may occur, if there's a natural disaster, civil unrest, terrorist activities, explosions. These are things that we don't necessarily deal with that we may need some assistance in them as well. Okay. Then we talk about our evacuations. I will just let you know if you ever want to do an assessment on whether or not a hospital is prepared or where you can ask, how do you evacuate from your lab? They should be preparing for 3 different types of evacuations. Now, this, by the way, just so you know, again, this manual was produced in partnership with first responders. These activities, these ideas are in partnership. And let me explain how we came up with this idea. Chief Burke, who now is, I think he's the captain, or he may have just retired from the Boston Fire Department. Chief Burke called and he said, Sean, I'm having a problem. I said, what's the problem? He says, I have BSL-4 scientists that say they will not evacuate if a fire alarm goes off. And I said, Chief Burke, I have to be honest with you. I kind of agree with the scientists. I said, they could be doing necropsies on a monkey and a fire alarm is going off. If there's no apparent risk to them, having them evacuate will put them at more risk than it will be a benefit with the fire alarm. Oh, man, he got so mad. He said, Sean, he says, when a fire alarm goes off, I'm not asking you if you're on a 101-story building to jump out of the 101-story building to get out. He says, I'm just asking you to position yourself so that if something does happen, you need to get out of the lab right away. You need to get out of the lab right away. And so I was like, oh, it was a gap that we had identified. And I said, so, okay, well, let's work on this, Chief Burke. What can we do? And this is where we came up with the red, green, and yellow. And if you see, I have his name right here on the bottom left, Chief Paul Burke of the Boston Fire Department. He's the one that helped me develop this. And he said, okay, listen, a green evacuation is if you're in the lab and you don't see any threat, but alarm's going off, you at least stop what you're doing and call out for more information. Okay. And that's critical. A yellow is a modified, and then red is a life threatening. And with his help, we developed the red, green, and yellow aspect for evacuation. This impresses firefighters, by the way. When they see this, it's like, wow, you guys have really thought about all types of evacuation. Mhm. So this line right here is containment, meaning containment is kept in a green and yellow evacuation. A modified evacuation is when, say, like a spill occurs and maybe you've grossly contaminated yourself. You're not going to run out to the hallway and contaminate outside the hallway, but you're going to modify the way you do things, get out of the lab. So it's a yellow. It's not going along with what you normally do. It's a modified evacuation process. Or if you're evacuating someone who's unconscious, you're going to take them to the door. You're going to strip them down. You're still ensuring containment, but you're doing it in a modified fashion. Okay, that's yellow. Whereas red is, I'm out. I've lost containment, but my life was at risk and I needed to get out. And I'm reporting somewhere, like I'm not mingling with people, but I'm standing far away. But we did breach containment because life was at risk. Does that make sense? When I think, well, Travis, was it you? I don't. Who responded to the gas um, that happened here? Somebody was. Yeah, somebody responded and ran into the lab. That was you. Yeah. Yeah, the way he was describing it, those students that were running out of the lab, that was life threatening. They didn't have to remove their glove. They ran out, and that's what you want them to do. But you have to realize when they run out, that's a breach. You now have a breach in your containment, but that's good. At least you can clean that up later, but you get everybody out. Does that make sense? Okay. Then we go into medical emergencies. And again, one thing that is very impressive, and it's personal here, is they are impressed with this because they're like, oh, wow, this is very good. You guys will move them out for us to deal with them. Okay, we don't have to come into containment. They like that very, very much. When we do this, it's sweet for me because I remember doing it originally. I could still remember the day where we were doing it in front of the docs and the fire department, and they were laughing at us. I mean, we were doing CPR in the lab with a breathing bag, and they were like, why do you have a breathing bag? And see, first, most doctors can't even do a breathing bag right. You're not even doctors. You're doing CPR in lab. Okay, fine. You're doing CPR in the lab. Do you think we're coming into this lab when we show up? No, not a chance. He says, and if you wheel this guy out in this gear, you think we're going to touch him? Not a chance. I mean, it was really funny. It was like, wow. So what we do is we demonstrate exactly what we would do with the goal of 3 to 5 minutes. And we tell them 3 to 5 minutes, and they all know that brain death occurs. And they're, again, they see this and they're like, wow, okay. Yeah, you guys, you're on it. Okay. That's exactly how we would want that to happen. They have a couple questions. And then we talk about other emergencies that we have. And some of them will ask very pointed very pointed questions, which you don't lie about. If they say to you, if a scientist wanted to come and steal an agent from this lab, could they do that? Your answer better be yes. Even in the most secure lab, yes. If you try to sugarcoat it, they'll think you're lying. They'll know you're lying. These are real down to earth people. And so you say yes, but let me tell you what we've done. In order for something like that to happen, this is what would have to take place. And you say it would make a great Hollywood movie, but it's very, very unlikely. And these are the reasons why. And you just go through exactly what you have in place. Is it possible? Absolutely. Is it likely? Not very likely. And one of the biggest reasons is, and they'll look at you and you say, because they don't need this lab to do it. That's how good the scientists are. If they want to do this, they just do it from home. What? What are you talking about? Yeah, that's how good they are. We hire the best scientists. They don't need a laboratory to get the agent. They can get the agent from nature. And they're like, oh, I never knew that. All right. And after that, they take a post assessment and they take a perception assessment, and we evaluate the differences of pre and post. And again, vast differences. Yes, ma'am.